Ford has released their Q1 2023 earnings and things look quite good for them, though there are some concerning trends. Now, before we dive into Ford's numbers specifically, let's first do a recap of what we've been seeing with these earnings whenever it comes to automakers and dealerships. With dealership groups, so I'm talking companies like AutoNation and CarMax, these dealership groups that sell cars, they've been experiencing a pretty tough crunch. Demand on the dealership side of the business is falling a bit and costs are rising. In the case of both AutoNation and CarMax, they've essentially deemed cutting expenses and cost-saving measures as #1 priority. That is how dealership groups are going to exit this current economic situation, keep expenses low, and simply weather the storm of high interest rates. Automakers, on the other hand, are experiencing something similar but different. Car prices are still very high, but they are going down, and the cost to produce a vehicle is also high. As a result, from the perspective of the automaker, we are seeing revenue increase, but we're seeing ultimate profit decline. This is because the profit margin is declining as well. This is because while units sold and demand is still quite high, the amount that these automakers are making from each vehicle sold is declining, which is causing an overall decline in profit. So in some ways, the auto market today can be considered to be a bit of a double-edged sword. Sure, automakers are making a lot of revenue, but they aren't making a ton of profit. And while revenue has grown in some cases in the high single or even double-digit numbers, profit is also seeing a decline in the double digits as well, which isn't ideal. But now with that context out of the way, let's dig into Ford's performance. Ford's revenue came in at $41.5 billion, a whopping 20% higher than last year, and they beat expectations, which were at $36.1 billion for the quarter. Earnings per share also beat expectations, with expectations sitting at 41 cents per share, and earnings per share actually came out to 63 cents per share. For the first time, Ford broke out their earnings by segment. So Ford Blue, which is their traditional gas-powered vehicles, Ford Model E, which is their electric vehicle segment, and Ford Pro, which is more of their commercial segment. Ford Blue carried the majority of revenue with $25.1 billion, with an operating margin of 10.4%, showing a profit of $2.623 billion. Ford Pro, the commercial segment, was about half that, with a $13.2 billion in revenue, 10.3% operating margin, and a $1.366 billion profit. And Ford Model E, the electric vehicle segment, was the real loser. The Ford Model E segment saw $700 million in revenue with $722 million in losses. This segment is operating at a negative 102% operating margin. So for every electric vehicle that Ford sells, they're actually losing more money than they're making from that vehicle. Now, despite the fact that this is a jarring figure and $722 million in losses in a single quarter is an astronomical amount, this actually doesn't come as a surprise. Last year, Ford lost over $3 billion from their electric vehicles, mainly due to their Rivian investment, and this year, Ford has already been prepping investors for the fact that they're probably going to lose close to $3 billion this year as well. Though the goal is that Ford will reach break even on their electric vehicles by the end of the year, but whether or not that's going to happen remains to be seen. I guess only time will tell. The biggest disappointment regarding the Ford Model E program isn't the losses, but was instead the units sold, losses, and revenue compared to this time last year, which was down quite a bit. Though Ford does give some reasons as to why this decrease occurred, including investments into the EV production, it still isn't a good look. Some other non-financial figures include that Ford is the #1 truck manufacturer in the United States, and Ford Blue Cruise, which is Ford's autopilot, is the top-rated driving assist program, even beating out Tesla, which had quite the head start compared to Ford. So the fact that Ford is beating them is quite a feat. Ford Credit also saw a pretty steep decline from $928 million in Q1 of 2022 to $303 million in this quarter, which again isn't a surprise given the fact whenever interest rates are high and credit is more sparse, this typically leads to credit and financial institutions making less money, which is something that we not only saw with Ford Credit, but we also saw with other automakers and financial lenders as well. Now, all in all, these earnings from Ford are quite good. They not only beat earnings expectations and revenue expectations, but they also saw an increase in not only revenue, profit, and margin year over year, which is huge. And comparatively, Ford actually outperformed competitors like GM and Tesla, even though Tesla is still way ahead of Ford whenever it comes to the profitability of EVs specifically. And while sure, it isn't a good thing that the Ford Model E program is burning through money like crazy, it also doesn't come as a surprise, and it is expected given the fact that electric vehicles are still very new, and all things considered, Ford hasn't been producing them for that long. Even Tesla, which has the highest profit margin for electric vehicles today, was burning through money in the beginning, and it took years for them to actually make money from the cars that they were selling. And Ford is going through the same thing today. But I think it is safe to say that there is some sort of light at the end of the tunnel to profitability, or at the very least break even. The question is that going to come at the end of 2023, or is it going to come at some point in the future? Like I mentioned earlier, only time will tell. Now, as far as what this means for the overall car market, to be honest, I don't know that it's a good thing. At least not when it comes to consumer prices coming down, and the average car buyer getting a good deal. Ford's earnings and demands were quite strong, which shows that there is still a demand in the car market as things stand today, regardless of the fact that interest rates are high, the economy is in a questionable state, and car prices still haven't gone down like we had hoped. And in order for car prices to go down, we're going to have to see a decrease in demand, which unfortunately isn't what we've been seeing this past quarter. And given the fact that Ford did outperform analyst expectations and they had more demand than I think many people expected, that isn't a good sign that car prices are going to be falling significantly anytime soon, at least not with new cars. Now, as I record this video, we are expecting more information regarding interest rates and whether or not they will be increased and what is expected to be the last increase for the foreseeable future. And this could have an impact on the overall car market. And this interest rate hike that is expected to happen could have an impact on the overall car market, because as interest rates increase, it becomes more and more expensive to borrow money. And given the fact that the majority of new cars on the market today are financed, it becomes more expensive to do so whenever interest rates are high. So if interest rates do rise, which again they are expected to do, this could have a negative impact on the car market as a whole. But on the flip side of the equation, I think there is a very valid argument to be made that interest rates have been rising for the last year, and that hasn't exactly had the impact that we were hoping it would have on the overall car market. Even with interest rates through the roof, being in the double digits for many buyers, people are still buying cars, regardless of the astronomical cost. We also just received some private jobs data for April, and it is extremely strong. In fact, according to ADP, private payroll passed 296,000. This is an indicator that the job market in general is very strong. So economic indicators look quite good, even though the concerns of a recession are still looming. Now, a few other important things that I think should be noted is that Carvana is going to be releasing their earnings today, but they haven't done it as I'm recording this video. But it is expected that they should see a decrease in losses from this time last year, which will be really interesting to see if that actually ends up happening. Now, I might make a short about Carvana, but I probably won't make a standalone video about them, and the reason is I don't think Carvana is a reflection of the overall car market like some other dealerships and automakers are. For example, I think AutoNation, CarMax, Ford, and GM, the performance of these companies really does have an impact and reflects what's going on in the car market. And the same can't be said with Carvana because they're such a mess. But it will be interesting to see what their earnings report and how much in losses they actually have. But unfortunately, whenever it comes to Ford's performance, it is an indicator that things aren't looking great for the average consumer. And as much as I would have loved to sit here and talk about how Ford is sounding the alarm, things don't look good, and this is overall a good indicator that prices are going to crash, this just simply isn't the case. The performance of Ford and other companies is an indicator that the car market is still strong, despite the fact that the economy is questionable, interest rates are high, and consumer debt is skyrocketing. And truthfully, this is the exact opposite of what we want if we really do want to see car prices crash. But like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.